Okay, we have Rob back. Welcome back, Rob. Thanks for Bill for stepping in last week. We really had some fun with the meeting. Right now, we're in the middle of how it works, and we are on page 63. Now, normally we would just say the third step prayer and jump in, but what we're going to do is actually jump in first and then say the third step prayer, since that's kind of where we're going to be. We're going to start at, we were now at step 3, which kind of backs us up a little bit. We'll talk briefly about that, and then we'll jump into next, we'll launch into A Course of Vigorous Action, step 4. So, all right, Rob.
Hi, everybody. My name's Rob K., recovered alcoholic. Great to see everybody here. Hope everybody's doing fantastic. We're now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him.
Yep, absolutely. So a couple of things here. We actually do step 3 when we say the step 3 prayer. Obviously, we've said this in the past, that you have the ability to change this up as you see fit, that helps fit your position and the way that you approach things. When you say thou wilt, I'm sorry, relieve me of the bondage of self, just remember that you are the problem. And removing that is really the idea here. And step 3 really is an idea. So kind of think in terms of that. As you kind of go on down, I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life is a reference to step 12, because you want to basically move on to help others. And at the end of this, obviously, you've now done step 3. I'm talking a little bit about, we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves and utterly to him. And that is kind of a move from point A to point B. And it gives us that ability to stop and think. So this is a really good time for you to be, most people in this case, when they do a step 3 prayer, literally get down on their knees and pray very, very methodically and very actively. Do this prayer and really internalize and personalize it for themselves. Rob?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things. The step 3 prayer is the idea of obtaining these experiences going through the course of action. It is a summary of what you can experience going through this process. Step 11 confirms this idea by becoming the experience. Okay. You know, the step 3 prayer, we made a decision not to turn it over. We do step 3 before we say it. The prayer is an affirmation that we have done step 3. So I'll just throw that out there. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, and in fact, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once.
Yeah, and there is some truth to this. The saying it with and in front of somebody. Again, as we talked about, being on your knees and truly being in position for this prayer and saying it out loud. The idea here is to voice it without reservation, and that's a very personal and private thing. So it's something that you have to do, and it may take some practice. I think that part of praying takes practice, and doing it often enough. I think that that's where you find that things begin to start happening. Rob?
Yeah. Also, there is another one on page 215, one that Fitzmail had. If everybody wants to turn to page 215, remember, step 3 is an idea, and it doesn't have to be those exact words, but on page 215, there was another idea of what Fitzmayo said. And it's in about the middle of the page. The thing I do is to say, God, here I am, and here are all my troubles. I made a mess of things and can't do anything about it. You take me and all my troubles and do anything you want with me. Does this answer your question? Yes, it does. I answered. I returned to bed. And that was Fitzmayo. I just want to throw that in because as Leo has said, and what it says in the book, obviously, is that the words are optional. Okay, as long as you voice the idea. So next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions.
Yeah, this is an important point. And I think we stop for just a minute and we talk about step 4, just as it's the idea of it is that first, step 4 is not something to be afraid of. It isn't something to dread. I think that a lot of the fellowship meetings you'll hear people talk about how bad their step 4 was. I think it does it an injustice to present it in such a way that a newcomer, for example, hearing that for the first time is thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, I don't want to do a step 4. And the seed is planted, and now all of a sudden there's resistance and reluctance to do a good step 4. But a step 4, I think part of it is that a vigorous action, vital and crucial step, and the strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Should be a very enlightening kind of step. It should be something that you look forward to. And yes, there is going to be some tough admissions that you're going to make. There's going to be some things that you're going to remember by doing this step, this exercise, and it's going to be vitally important to get those down. The other thing about a step 4 is it shouldn't be a novel. All right. So thinking about this too, and I think some people probably dread it because they do a lot of writing. You don't have to describe each of your resentments, your fears, your objections, things like that. You don't have to describe them so that they read like a story. Basically, you put a few words in that relate to the particular thing you're writing about, and then you move on to the next column and the next column and the next column. But it should be a fairly brief kind of thing that you're going to do. So just a few pointers that we will be looking at as we go through the step 4 process here over the next page or 3, just to kind of remember. Really look forward to the step, know that it's going to take some work, some strenuous work, some very, far-reaching, soul-searching kind of inward thinking and revealing of some innermost resentments. And another thing is, it's that when you find somebody that has an objection, for example, there's usually an objection behind that particular objection that they're voicing. So you really have to dig into your own resentments, because that may be on the surface one thing, but what really is the real resentment is what's underneath that. What happened that caused you to feel the way you feel? And that's where you want to kind of dig into and kind of get into in order to do that. And we're going to kind of talk about those things as we go along. I just kind of wanted to kind of do a preface here, kind of moving into it. Rob?
Beautiful. And when do we do step 3? I've heard different things in the fellowship. We wait a year, we wait a couple of months, we wait. No, this book tells us when we do it. After we have completed step 3, we launch out. That doesn't mean, we take our time. And why do we not take our time? Because it tells us on page 64 that Though our decision was a vital, step 3 was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless it was followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Okay, step 3 will last a very short period of time. Okay, and then what happens is our spiritual connection goes further and further apart. So it'll have very in Toronto, we call it the 1, 2, 3 cha-cha-cha. We do step 1, 2, and 3, and then we rest on our laurels. And then what happens? We end up going back out. So we launch out, we go to it right away. And as Leo said, you know, too many people in a fellowship make it seem like it's such a difficult matter. These are things that have been eating our lunch. These are things that have been bothering us for a long period of time. We're not going to find out anything that we don't already know. Okay, so please don't be scared of it. And as Leo said, all we have to do is put it down in point blank or point forms, because we know the story. When I mention, you know, Paula, I know what happened. If I mention Rob, I know what the story is. So I don't have to put it all down on paper, because it's going to be at the top of mind. I know what happened. I know why I'm mad at these ideas there. So back on page 64, everybody. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which take no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values.
Yeah, and I think the strong point that I want to make here is that one object is to disclose damage or unsaleable goods and get rid of them promptly and without regret. Those resentments that you have, the fears that you have, the idea of doing this personal inventory is to get this down on paper so that you can see it, but it is also so that you can get rid of it. And that's really what's important, to be able to get past, get over, and release the pent up frustration, the tension, and the potential anger and emotions that you have for these resentments. You've got to be able to let go. So that's what they're trying to say in my mind here, is that being able to identify those resentments that you have, those fears, those objections, etc., and be able to get rid of them with regard to getting them out there and done. Sorry, getting a little tongue-tied there. Rob?
Yeah, I got to unmute myself because the dogs are acting up here. I don't know about those dogs. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered as common manifestations.
Yeah, and this is really also another important. We're talking about us. We're not talking about the other person, the other people, that kind of thing, and their problems, their shortcomings, their potential resentments, fears, you know, that type of thing. We're talking about the things that we have done to harm others, our conduct, if you will, in regards to the way that we've acted, reacted, and treated other people. We're talking about us, not the other person. So it's a very, very inward and personal thing. It is about us and only us in this particular exercise as step 4. Rob?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in manifested, little definition in there, created or shown. What else is there here? Appearances, manifested, exhibited, brought forward. So these are things that are manifested in various ways on how we deal with things. You know, if we have fear, we might stop going to different places. You know, if we have anxiety, okay, it's all of these things that are in our mind. Self defeated us, not alcoholism. So remember that. So that's why we have to deal with self.
Yeah,
Resentment.
Rob, real quick,
Yeah.
let's go to the beginning of page 72. That first half of the paragraph, I think, is a good point right now to make with regard to what is it we're going to do with this step 4. So at the very beginning of page 72.
You got it. Page 72, everybody. Into action. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects which we have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects.
Okay, and so that's kind of what we're going to ultimately do with this step 4. So once we've gone through the process, we've got things down on paper. This is what we're going to do: is we're going to share this with another person, and cast out the resentments, the fears, the harms, and the conduct. All right, back to page 64.
Okay, and here we go. Resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with the resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up.
Good. We'll read right to the where it's.
You got it. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which had been interfered with?
Right. So resentment, #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else, and the spiritual disease that is a result of it. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about here is that here is mention of spiritual malady, and there is a misnomer that this is a symptom of alcoholism. And we know for a fact that there are only 2 symptoms, and that is the allergy and the malady. All right. And the spiritual malady is part of the human condition, and all people suffer from spiritual malady. So spiritual malady is something that we as a human suffer from. And so all humans suffer from the same thing. So it's one point that I want to make, that this is not a symptom of alcoholism, but it is a symptom of the human condition. And we're going to talk about that in more detail. Another thing here is that we also identify different things that we have that we're going to be working on. And there's 7 of them. And those are: 1, your self-esteem; 2, your pocketbooks or financial; 3 is your ambitions; 4 is personal relationships; 5 is your sex relations or sex life; 6 is your security. And down towards the bottom of the page, the last thing that we do in #7 is our pride. These are the things that are going to be affected by resentments, fears, harms, and conduct. So real quick: 1 is self-esteem; 2 is our pocketbooks; 3 is ambitions; 4 is personal relationships; 5 is our sex life; 6 is security; and 7 is pride. Rob?
Yep. We were usually as definite as this example. I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. The cause? His attention to my wife, and it affects my sex relations. I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. The cause? Told my wife of my mistress, affects my sex relations, my self-esteem, fear. I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. Brown may get my job at the office. Affects my security, self-esteem, bracketed fear. I'm resentful at Mrs. Jones. The cause? She's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend, she's a gossip. Affects my personal relationship. Self-esteem, bracketed fear. I'm resentful at my employer. The cause? Unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. Affects my self-esteem, bracketed fear, security. I'm resentful at my wife. The cause? Misunderstands and nags. Likes Brown, wants house put in her name. It affects my pride, personal sex relation, security, bracketed fear. We went
So-
back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong it, and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived.
Yeah, so we're kind of talking about the step 4, and there is a dozen ways that people do their step 4. Bottom line is this, is that you want to identify 4 distinct areas. Those are your resentments, your fears, harms, and your conduct. And that really kind of goes into column 1, if you will. This is going to be the simple version of it, which is what is it that you've got a fear, a resentment for, a harm, a conduct. I'm sorry, that it's going to be the you're resentful at what person. That's column 1. Column 2 is going to be the cause. And then column 3 is going to be these type of fears, harms, and conduct. Now, I identify a fear as this, and there's really 3 things that you're fearful of when it comes to this particular kind of fear. So we're not talking about a monster in the closet, okay? We're talking about you're going to lose something that you have. That's 1. Number 2 is you're not going to get something that you want. And number 3, you will find out what I did. So somebody's going to find out what you did. Those are the 3 kinds of fears that we're talking about. Now, what's important here is this, and you kind of see the brevity that's going on. They identify a person, they identify the cause, and it's just his attention to my wife. You don't have to give a scenario or a story about what that means. You just have to say his attention to my wife. This is the first one in here. And what does it affect? My sex relations and my self-esteem. All right. Now, what's important is the honesty and the thoroughness of the process. So really, step 4 is not about the mechanics, which is we can see the 3 columns here. It's about the experience that you get from it. And what's important about the experience? Well, it's the ability to kind of identify with the person that you have a resentment for. Keep it simple. What caused that resentment? And where does it affect you in your life of the things that we talked about? Okay. And those are the 7 ideas that we gave earlier: the self-esteem, pocketbooks, ambitions, personal relationships, sex life, security, and pride. What is affected in that process? And what's important here is how you have affected this. And that's what you're really looking for. What is it that you did to contribute? What is it that you are doing in order to cause the problems that you have? Now, the Keystone Group, and I'll just say this quickly, uses a worksheet process for step 4, and there's actually 4 pages that goes with that. And out of the 4 pages, for example, the first page is they are reviewing your fears and only your fears. Page 2 is your sex life. Page 3 is specifically people that you have hurt by your conduct. Your conduct. And sorry, let me get to page 4. Page 4 is a review of all of those and how you are going to let go of that conduct, and how you're going to be able to language it and let go. It's the result. Are you willing to do X? Are you willing to do Y? Are you willing to do Z? The answer should be, to some extent, yes, in all categories, to be able to let go of this and move forward. Rob?
Yeah, and you can find all different sheets on the internet to do your step 4 if need be. You know, we always recommend whatever sheets your sponsor wants you to use those. Okay, if anybody needs the sheets that the Keystone Group have, you can always email me and I will make sure you get them. But as I say, Joe and Charlie have sheets up on the internet. There are so many different ways that people do them that, you know, hey, the idea is to actually do the work, though. So let's stress that. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die.
Yeah, these resentments are taking up space in our heads rent free. I mean, we're allowing this to overwhelm us. It's going to cloud us in our judgment. You end up hating someone or something, and it keeps you up at night. These are the things that you're really working on. Those are the things that you really want to make sure that you get control of. The things that are going to keep you awake at night, that you're going to dwell on and you're going to get consumed by. The alcoholic whose hope is maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. So you really have to get past it. It's important to be able to put it down honestly and be very thorough, and then to express it to another person. It's hard to explain, but something happens after you've done your step 4 and you've actually admitted these things to another person. There is this weight that's lifted off your shoulders. I can't explain it any better than that. There's a weight lifted off your shoulders. And normally you're fairly well spent or exhausted after you've done this, because you've really had to struggle to admit some of the things that you're admitting to another person. And it's important to be able to do it very honestly and thoroughly. So aside from the fact that there's a certain amount of weight lifted off your shoulders and being somewhat worn out from it all, that is a good indication that you've done a pretty good step 4, just kind of as we're looking at it. The idea here is to get this stuff out of your head and to stop dwelling on it, so that you're not tempted to drink in order to drown out what is taking up that space in your head. Essentially trying not to drink. And the more thorough you are, the more honest you are, the better off you're going to be, and the stronger your recovery is going to be, and your ability to not drink is going to increase. Rob?
The best analogy I've had about resentments, Lijan, you've heard this many times from me, and is the gutter on your side of the house where the water flows into the downspout. Okay, resentments or leaves collect in the gutter, and what happens is they go into the downspout. A couple of leaves will slow the water down a little bit, but the more leaves that get caught in the downspout, the water can't flow through anymore, so the water starts to back up. That is similar to resentments that are in our heart. Okay, so what do we have to do? Because the water's not flowing through, God can't come through because of all these resentments. What we have to do is we have to stick our hand down the downspout, and we have to start pulling out all these leaves that are stopping the water from going through. We keep reaching in, getting all these leaves out until it gets to the point where there's no more leaves and the water is now flowing freely. That's what we do with our resentments. We get rid of them so that God can come into our heart. That was the best analogy that I've ever heard. It made sense to me. I could understand it. I could visualize it. I hope it works for you. If it doesn't, I'll keep listening for different analogies and bring them to this meeting. But as I say, that made the most sense to me because, you hear people talk about the blockages. What is blocking us off from God? Okay, because the resentments are the number one offender. So we have to get rid of these resentments. How do I get rid of them? Well, we start pulling them out and we start voicing them out loud so that it's out. It's not stuck inside us anymore. It is out. It is gone. It's in the ether. So hope that helps. If it doesn't, as I say, I'll keep working on it. If we were to live, we had to be, and I also want to mention the last line that I read was, and with us to drink is to die. If we continue to drink, we will die. So please, we're talking serious stuff here. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison.
Very much so poison. And when we talk about a brainstorm, we're talking about the storm that's going on in your mind. It's tumultuous, it's chaotic, and it doesn't do anybody any good. It's a very negative thing, and it causes us to be angry, discontented, and there's a lot of tension there. So the idea here is to be free of that by getting it out on paper and admitted to another person. And just because it's okay for somebody else doesn't necessarily mean it's good for us. It is not good for us. All it does is promote the idea that we're going to drink again, and then we find ourselves drinking again, and then we're all the way back to square zero. And it's a problem at that point. And for a lot of us, it gets worse and worse as we get older and further along. And so now for most of us, to drink at this point, it really is destructive. It really is destructive. And we have to remind ourselves every day that is the case. So this is a good point here, basically, to be free of anger. And that's an important point. And it's an exercise you have to go through in order to be free of anger. Rob?
And guess what? We're going to come up to it.
Yeah.
So that resentments don't keep coming up. We're going to get to that next. The first part of this process is to remove the blockages. The second part is to master resentment so they don't build up again. And that's what we're coming up to. So the thing I love about this book is that it never mentions something without giving us how to deal with it. And that's the beauty of this book. We turned back to the list where it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol.
Right. So we're getting prepped for what we're going to do next. We're coming up on the step 4 prayer and some ideas here. And they're going to answer that. So basically the idea here is that the people really dominated us. Again, we're talking about taking up that space in our heads and keeping us up at night. And we're trying to get rid of that. We're trying to get clear of that. And doing so helps clean house for us on and allows us to build that relationship with a higher power. Rob?
Yeah, and remember, we have all these resentments against people, places, and institutions. And a lot of time, the people that we're resentful, I don't even realize that we have a resentment towards them because it's all on us. We're the ones that are carrying it. a lot of times you go to people and say, I'm really sorry that I felt this way about you. I didn't, I should. And they're going, you did? I didn't know you felt that way. So a lot of times it's all in our mind, you know, and it says here, don't forget, it mentions it twice, but for alcohol, these things are poison. These things can kill us, because we can't change because we're so resentful at people, places, and things, you know. But as I said, this book gives us the answer on how to deal. We've, you know, we- this is how we're going to deal with it in the future now. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And Leo, can I just say that one more time, please? We ask
Absolutely.
God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done.
Yeah, and there's what I can say for this is absolutely what we're basically doing is we're turning this around, and instead of finding that resentment, letting that anger well up in us, and pointing a finger at somebody saying you did this or you are this or you said that kind of thing, you stop, take a pause and a breath, and you basically say, this is a sick person. How can I be helpful to him? What is it I can do that will help this person that is either angry with me, they're resentful of me, or they're saying something that is very damaging and hurtful to me? How can I help them? And then the important part, God save me from being angry. Please don't get upset. Just realize that this person has got the same struggles that I have, because we all suffer from the human condition. We all are actually spiritually sick. All right. And so at that point, what we're trying to do is say, how can I help? And don't get angry. Treat it as if you would treat another sick person that you would. That's exactly what you would want to do. How can I help? And certainly I'm not going to get angry. In fact, it doesn't even enter your mind to get angry with a sick person in most cases. So this is something that you want to do with this type of person as well. And then thy will be done. That's it. It's the best way to kind of just describe exactly what's happening here. This is about stopping, doing the pause, as Rob will always say, take a breath and pray on how you can help, and don't get angry. And if you can do those things, it's amazing at what happens next. Rob?
Yeah. But one thing I do have to stress is that this is a practice. This is not something that comes naturally to us. Okay. The more we do it, the more we find that it works. Okay. But unless we practice these principles, as they say, we're not going to know that it works. But the more we do it, the more we realize that, what, I don't have these resentments building up anymore. Okay. I don't feel that way about these people anymore. And when you realize that, you will keep doing it. Prayer works, but unless we do it, we don't know that it will work. So we have to practice these things. And the more we practice, the more we find that it works. And a couple of things I just wanted to say about step 4. Our decision based on self placed us in a position to be hurt, fear, self-seeking, and frightened. So we must be rid of the selfishness. And selfishness is will take care of oneself over someone else's. Something for my advantage over somebody else. I have to be rid of that selfishness or it'll kill me. So therefore, I'm changing the way I think. Okay? And also, when you're praying, you can pray for yourself so it can help other people. You just can't pray for, I'd like a new car. I would like to win the lottery. I would like to have hair. These are things you can pray for, but it's not going to happen. So it's a waste. No, but I can pray, that different people feel better, that the tough times that they're going through in their life are taken away so that they can live and enjoy life. They can be joyous and free. Remember, this is how we master resentment. Okay, we look at people as sick. They are spiritually sick, just like we were. And I stress that we were sick because we're getting rid of them. And we can't help everybody. And this is what I love about this book. It takes into account other things, and that's what we're going to hit right now. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. I love that line, Leo.
Oh yeah, it's very important. Again, it's that God save me from being angry. Avoid that natural tendency for somebody that's resentful to retaliate and argue. It's a very hard thing to do, but it's a very rewarding thing if you actually can avoid retaliation and argument. It's really something else to experience once you start doing it. And really, you have to, just think in terms of this other person as being sick. You absolutely want to be helpful. You don't want to be unhelpful, and you can't be helpful to all people. All right. But at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. This is the epitome of keeping your side of the street clean. If you treat everyone in this manner, maybe it doesn't get over their resentments. Maybe it doesn't get them from being angry or argumentative, but you can control you. Can't control somebody else. But by controlling yourself in regards to this, not being angry, showing some tolerance, trying to be helpful, all of a sudden now the whole demeanor will change. And if it doesn't, you've done your best, and there's an amazing feeling that comes with that. And that's what you're looking for, is that amazing feeling, that good feeling, not the feeling of regret, remorse, guilt, whatever it might be, shame, anything that's going to cause you a negative emotion, you want to try to avoid. And after that, you're going to find that you're going to feel a whole lot better about yourself, and you're going to start feeling better about other people, and they're going to start noticing it. That's the other part. Probably before you do, they're going to start noticing it. And in time, perhaps that their anger starts to subside, especially when you're talking about a loved one that's been hurt or harmed by your conduct of the past. They are going to show some anger. But if you can show them some kindness, some tolerance, and some helpfulness, in the end, they should start to reciprocate in some manner or fashion. I'm not saying overnight. It could take quite a bit of time, but they should start to do something in that regard and be very positive. Rob?
So true. We avoid retaliation or argument. It doesn't work. How often do we get into that? And that starts a resentment right there. But we can't help people if we're yelling and screaming loud, trying to be louder than the next person. The step 3 prayer, we made a deal with God that we would be helpful to all people. Okay, we are not God. Therefore, we're supposed to be doing His work. I just love the fact we cannot be helpful to all people. There are still sick people out there who will try to take advantage of your kindness. Some people you have to walk away from, but we can show them a kindly and tolerant view, and realize that, they're spiritually sick, just like I was. Okay, and I stress that so much. I was, so therefore, we can't help everybody, but we try. We do our best, right? But as I say, if we can't help them, we can walk away, knowing that they're spiritually sick. So we don't build up this resentment anymore. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight.
This is pretty straightforward stuff, and I'll use that word since it's been a part of this as well. This is really putting out of our minds the wrongs of others had done. This is not about what they did wrong. It's about what you have done and the negative things that have resulted because of that. We looked for our own mistakes, where it had been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. We're going to talk a little bit about fears here in just a minute. Now, just because we're looking at our own problems doesn't mean that others don't have their own problems. So again, we're not saying that you're the only one at fault here. We're just saying that the only thing you should be looking at is your own faults. It's your inventory, not someone else's. And faults that we listed, you're gonna list those and then place them in black and white. This is an exercise that really psychologically does a lot for people. You know, I know some people at night that when they wake up in the middle of the night with a thought, they'll just write it down on a piece of paper, and then that kind of clears their mind and it allows them to go back to sleep. The same kind of psychological effect happens with this. You get this down on paper, and there's kind of a clearing of your mind, a calming that comes over you, and the ability to come in and do what you want to do. Now, admitting your wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set the matter straight. So that's another exercise that we're going to be talking about here, is what you're going to do next and your willingness to set these matters straight. And that kind of goes into some follow-on steps, but really what you're doing is prepping yourself for exactly that. Look at this. I think what we're going to do, Rob, is we'll go on I want to talk about fears in a little bit more detail. Let's see where we are. Let's go ahead and just keep reading. I think we've got time to get through the next 2 or 3 paragraphs.
Okay, you got it, Leo. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. The short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We've
Yeah.
reviewed.
Go ahead, keep going.
We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about this. I'm going to review one more time, and Rob has it in the chat there. The 3 things that we're talking about as fears is is something we're going to lose. You're not going to get something that you want, and you will find out something that I did. And those are debilitating. They're paralyzing at times, and it's something that you need to be aware of. That can really be a major speed bump in trying to get in your progress. So it does touch about every aspect of your life. And it's something to be well aware of. So part of your step 4 is to get those fears down on paper, just like you would your resentments, just like you would your conduct, and just like you would your harms, the things that you want to really work on, to try and figure them out, and so that you can get past them. Rob?
Yeah, I just want to throw in, it says here, when cocky made it worse. Cocky is full of oneself. When we exert our own arrogance as a way to counteract how afraid we are, it makes matters worse, not better. This is how self-reliance failed us. So we pretend to be something that we're not. Perhaps there is a better way. You know, I love how this book, it always answers the questions. It doesn't leave us hanging here. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis. the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than finite self. We're in the world to play the role He assigned, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him does He enable us to match calamity with serenity.
Yeah, this is an important transition that you're going to be doing. Instead of relying on yourself, you're relying on your higher power. You're going to give up and give over control to that higher power. You're going to rely on the guidance that comes from that release and that freedom that you're going to feel. The idea is that there is kind of this calming effect that comes over you when you finally let go and stop the struggle. You stop the fight, you stop the arguing, the self loathing, the idea that you have to be in control of everything, and you have it as if a death grip on it. And you've got to go through that exercise of letting go, and you can visualize it as much as you can sense it and feel it. This is an important transition step here, where you're basically letting go and letting that higher power into your life and finding that inner strength that you've not been able to tap into, and you let that help guide your life going forward. And I like the kind of enable us to match calamity with serenity. There is such a serene feeling that comes over me when I basically stop, pause, let go of the negative emotion at the time, and I just say, okay, what's the next right thing to do? And I do it. Rob?
Yeah, I love the line of, we trust infinite God rather than finite self. We are not God. I thought I was God at one time, and I ran my life into the ground. So therefore, now I have trust and belief in a power greater than myself, who I call God. And I trust in my God. And I ask God, what should I do in this situation? The answer will come if I want it. And I rely on that. Okay. When in doubt, pause. I love the pause. Pray and use step 11. That's the acronym for pause. We pause and we ask God, what should I do in this situation? I'm not sure. If I go by my instincts, I'm going to screw it up, because I've done that in the past. So God, what should I do in this situation? Remember, on page 77, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and those around us. So my purpose is to help other people. Okay, not just look after myself. Leo, it is 12:53. Should we bring Bill into it?
Yes, sir, we should. We shall. Thanks.
This is incredible knowledge.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. You did a real good job today. This is a tough part of the book to get through. And, we started off with the third step prayer, and right after it says we're supposed to voicing it. The reason we do that, if you say it out loud, you can't take it back. If you just read it and you don't really say it, you can make believe you didn't do it. So once you say it out loud, it's kind of already done, and you can't take it back. Then he tells us when we're supposed to do step 4. He says next we launch, and then the next page it says at once. So you got 2 time frames, next or at once. You can use either one of them or anything in between. Their intention is for us to get this done. If we don't do it, it gives us a warning there. Step 3 is going to wear off if we don't do it, if we don't get into step 4 right away. And people are afraid of step 4. Step 4 is like an x-ray. You go to a doctor and you get an x-ray. The x-ray shows you what's wrong with you. That's what step 4 is. It's just something to show you what's wrong with you. And the faster you do it, the easier it's going to be to do. Because the longer you take to do this, the more stuff is going to happen, and you're going to have more stuff to write, and you're going to start thinking of more stuff and remembering more stuff. The quicker somebody does this, the easier it's going to be to get through it. And this is so simple, at least for me. I could do this step drunk. I know that I don't recommend that, but I'm saying I could. Because when I was drinking, I used to sit on a bar stool and tell a bartender everybody whose guts I hated. And that's really all I'm doing in a resentment inventory. This is information that we already have in our head. We know who these people are. So it's really not that hard to do. And a lot of people scare people with this. It's nothing to be scared of. And it told us in here, well, one object is to look for our liabilities. In other words, we're trying to find the bad stuff. That's what we're looking for here. That's what we're interested at this point. And Bill's giving us instructions on how to do this, and he even put a diagram in here on how to do it. And the best recommendation I could give anybody is use a sponsor to go through this. You know, and those worksheets are also very, very helpful. And like Rob pointed out, there's tons of them all over the internet. You don't have to use any specific one, whichever one your sponsor wants you to use. And I highly recommend using a sponsor to go through this. Because I know somebody might say that they could do this by themselves, just reading it out of the book. I don't know about anybody else. I tried to quit drinking all by myself, and it did not work. I had to come to AA and follow along with the suggestions that AA gave me, so I was able to quit drinking. And one of the suggestions that AA has is get a sponsor. So I definitely recommend getting a sponsor. I think that's really, really important. And one of the reasons that we go through this and we want to get rid of this stuff, if a resentment or a fear is telling me what to do, God can't. The resentments and the fears drowned out any guidance that I'm going to get from God. So that's why we have to get rid of this stuff so that God can get into our heads and tell us what to do. And then we went through this here 4-step prayer. I think that's one of the best things they put in this book. Basically, it's telling me I'm supposed to look at other people as sick people, not as bad people. If I look at somebody as being a bad person, it's easy for me to hate them. If I look at them as being a sick person, now I don't hate them anymore. And basically, this is giving us a way to get rid of most of our resentments. There may be some that are going to take a little more work than just saying a prayer to get rid of, but that's basically what we're trying to do with that 4th-step prayer. And then we touched on fears a little bit, and fears are basically fear is a lack of faith. If you have faith in God that things are going to be all right, work out the way they're supposed to, when you trust in God, most of your fears will start to go away. And Bill's given us a way of writing this stuff down and looking at them, and he has a fear prayer in here where we can pray about it. And this stuff works from my experience. That's all I can tell anybody. And I highly recommend trying it. If you didn't do it, give it a shot, see if it doesn't get better. If your life doesn't get better, we'll gladly refund your misery. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thank you, Bill. Really appreciate it. And just so everybody knows, Bill has a big book study that he does on Fridays, 11 a.m. on the East Coast. And it's a really good one. There's a lot of historical data and facts that he brings up in it that really brings the big book to life. All right, Rob, let's go ahead and close out with the Serenity Prayer.
I would love to. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.